Welcome, dear viewers. For more exclusive, thrilling stories every week, join our membership. Sit back, relax, and sip your coffee. Enjoy. The phone at the front desk rarely rings after midnight. But when it does, the caller ID just shows one word: lobby. That means the call is coming from the old rotary phone on the table next to the life-sized clown statue. You have to answer. It's always the same little kid's voice whispering, "Is my dad buried yet?" My boss told me exactly what to say back. You have to whisper, "Almost, son. Go back to sleep now. You never ever tell him yes." My name's Tyler Kowalski, and 3 months ago I was washing dishes at a truck stop outside Reno, scraping grease off plates while truckers complained about the coffee. Now I'm the night manager at the Clown Motel, staring at a collection of over 600 painted faces that watch me from every corner, shelf, and windowsill. Some days I think the grease was easier to stomach. I ended up in Tonopah the way most people do, by accident. My transmission gave out right at the junction of Highway 6 and 95, steam billowing from under the hood of my Honda like a distress signal. The mechanic at Jim Butler Motors quoted me $800 for the repair, money I didn't have. That's when Maggie Hernandez, the motel owner, walked into Pete's garage carrying a cup of coffee that smelled like salvation. "You looking for work?" she asked, eyeing my oil-stained shirt and the resignation written across my face. Tonopah sits in the middle of nowhere, Nevada, population 2,478, according to the faded welcome sign, though I'd bet half those people moved away and forgot to update the census. It's a town that mining built and mining abandoned, leaving behind empty lots where houses used to be in the old Tonopah Cemetery right across the street from the motel. The headstones there date back to the 1900s, when silver flowed from the mountains, and people had reason to believe this place might matter. The Clown Motel sits on Main Street like a fever dream painted in primary colors. The exterior walls are covered in clown murals, big shoes, red noses, smiles that follow you as you walk past. The neon sign out front features a clown's head that winks every 30 seconds, casting pink and blue shadows across the parking lot. During the day, tourists stop for photos, laughing and posing with their thumbs up. At night, when the wind picks up and carries voices from the cemetery, those same murals look different. The smiles seem wider. The eyes track movement. Maggie handed me the keys on my first day and said there were some rules I needed to follow. "Night shift gets complicated," she explained, unlocking the office door. Inside, clown dolls lined every surface. Vintage circus performers, modern balloon artists, antique marionettes with cracked porcelain faces. Most of them are just decoration, but some. She paused, studying a doll with glass eyes that seemed too large for its painted head. Some aren't. Maggie pulled a laminated sheet from the desk drawer, the kind of paper that gets handled so often it develops permanent creases. "These are your night rules," she said, sliding it across the desk. "Read them twice, memorize them, and don't get creative with interpretations." I picked up the paper, expecting the usual hospitality guidelines: smile at guests, keep the coffee fresh, call maintenance for plumbing issues. Instead, I found 7 numbered rules written in careful handwriting. 1. Answer the lobby phone when it rings after midnight. Always whisper your response. 2. Never turn your back on the clown in room 12's window. Face it when you walk past. 3. If a guest complains about children laughing in their room, offer them a different room immediately. Do not investigate the laughter. 4. The ice machine on the second floor will dispense red liquid between 2 a.m. and 3 a.m. Put up the out of order sign during this time. 5. If you see a small boy in pajamas in the lobby, do not speak to him. Call Maggie immediately. 6. The vending machine in the hallway sometimes takes exact change, but gives no product. This is normal. Apologize to the guest and offer a refund. 7. Never go into the basement alone after 10 p.m. I read through the list again, waiting for Maggie to crack a smile or explain the joke. She just watched me, sipping her coffee. "This is serious?" I asked. "Dead serious." She pointed to the first rule. "That phone call happens every night. Same kid, same question. You give him any other answer. Things get complicated." "What kind of complicated?" Maggie walked to the window and gestured toward the cemetery. Rows of weathered headstones stretched across the street, some leaning at odd angles, others completely toppled. A chain-link fence ran along the property line, but several sections had gaps where the metal had been cut or pulled apart. "See that grave with the fresh flowers? The one with the small headstone next to the bigger one?" I squinted through the glass. A child's grave sat beside what looked like an adult marker, plastic flowers faded by the Nevada sun. That's where little Bobby Ferretti is buried, next to his father. Mining accident in 1987 took them both. Bobby was only 8 inches tall. She turned back to me. "The boy who calls each night is asking about his dad's burial. You tell him yes, he'll know he can cross over. Problem is, if Bobby moves on, other things start moving in." "Other things?" "Tonopah's got a lot of graves, Tyler. Not all of them are occupied by folks who want to rest peacefully." She handed me a brass key attached to a rubber clown keychain. "Your shift starts at 10 tonight. Previous manager lasted 2 weeks before he quit. Said the dolls were watching him sleep." "Where did he sleep?" "Room 15. It's yours now if you want it. Comes with the job." That evening, I moved my duffel bag into room 15, a standard motel room with 2 differences. Every surface held at least 3 clown dolls, and the window provided a direct view of the cemetery. The dolls ranged from cute carnival prizes to vintage porcelain pieces with cracked faces and missing fingers. A particularly large one sat on the dresser, dressed in a purple satin costume with bells that chimed whenever the air conditioning kicked on. At 9:45 p.m., I walked to the front desk. The lobby felt different at night. During the day, the clown collection seemed quirky, a roadside attraction that made tourists laugh. Now, under the pale lobby lighting, the painted faces looked more alive. Their glass eyes caught every reflection, creating the illusion of movement in my peripheral vision. The rotary phone sat on a small table next to a life-sized clown statue dressed as a bellhop. The statue's uniform was faded red velvet, its white-gloved hands positioned as if ready to assist guests. Its smile was painted in bright red, the kind of permanent grin that never reached the eyes. I settled behind the registration desk and pulled out my phone to pass time. No signal. The cell tower closest to Tonopah was 15 miles away, and the mountains blocked most reception. A landline phone sat next to the computer, its cord twisted from years of use. At 11:30, a guest came down for ice. Mrs. Patterson from room 8, a retired teacher from Sacramento driving cross-country to visit her sister. She stopped at the desk on her way back from the ice machine. "Everything working properly up there?" I asked. "Oh yes, dear. Though I did notice the oddest thing. The machine gave me ice, but it made this grinding sound, like something was stuck inside." I made a note to check it tomorrow, then remembered Rule 4. The ice machine dispensed red liquid between 2 and 3 a.m. I glanced at the clock. 11:35 p.m. "Mrs. Patterson, would you mind if I moved you to a different room? We've been having some maintenance issues with the second floor." She looked confused but nodded. "If you think it's best." I grabbed the keys to room 4 and helped her move her bags. As we passed the ice machine, I noticed a small puddle of water beneath it, clear and normal. For now. Back at the desk, I watched the clock tick toward midnight. The lobby held that particular silence of late night, when even the highway traffic dies down and you can hear your own heartbeat. Outside, wind rattled the windows and sent plastic flowers tumbling across the cemetery grounds. At 11:59, I stared at the rotary phone. At midnight exactly, it rang. The phone's ring pierced the lobby silence like a scream. 3 short bursts, then quiet, then 3 more. I stared at the caller ID display. LOBBY. My hands shook as I lifted the receiver. The plastic felt cold against my ear, and for a moment I heard nothing but static. Then, so faint I had to strain to catch it, came a child's voice. "Is my dad buried yet?" The words sent ice through my veins. Bobby Ferretti, 8 years old, 35 years dead, asking about his father's grave. I forced myself to whisper, exactly as Maggie had instructed. "Almost, son. Go back to sleep now." Silence stretched across the line. I could hear something in the background, wind maybe, or the sound of breathing. Then the connection went dead. I set the receiver down with trembling fingers and looked around the lobby. Everything appeared the same, but the air felt different now, charged with something I couldn't name. The clown dolls seemed to be watching more intently, their painted eyes tracking my movements as I walked around the desk. Outside, the cemetery lay bathed in moonlight. I pressed my face to the window, searching for any sign of movement among the headstones. Nothing stirred except the plastic flowers dancing in the wind. The rest of the night passed quietly. A few guests checked in, a trucker headed to Las Vegas, a young couple on their way to Death Valley. I handled their registrations with the practiced efficiency of someone trying to stay busy, trying not to think about dead children making phone calls. At 6 a.m., Maggie arrived with coffee and donuts from the Mizpah Hotel's restaurant down the street. She found me hunched over the desk, surrounded by guest registration forms I'd been organizing and reorganizing for the past 2 hours. "How'd it go?" she asked, setting a steaming cup in front of me. The phone rang. "Midnight exactly." She nodded, unsurprised. "What did you tell him?" "What you said to say. Almost, son. Go back to sleep now." I took a sip of coffee, grateful for the warmth. "Maggie, what happens if someone tells him yes?" "Last manager before you found out." She pulled up a chair and sat down heavily. "Name was Dennis Burke. Worked here about 3 years. Good employee, reliable. Followed all the rules except that one. One night in February, guest complained about the phone ringing constantly. Dennis got annoyed, picked up the receiver, and told the kid his father was buried and to stop calling." "What happened?" "Bobby moved on, like I said he would. But something else moved in to take his place. Something that used to be human but isn't anymore. It started making different calls." Maggie stared out at the cemetery, her expression grim. This thing would call guests directly in their rooms, tell them their own death dates. Accurate ones. Mrs. Chen from San Francisco got a call saying she had 6 days left. Heart attack took her on the drive home, exactly 6 days later. The coffee turned bitter in my mouth. "Where's Dennis now?" "St. Mary's Hospital in Reno. Psychiatric ward. Keeps saying the clowns are coming for him." My second night went smoother. The phone rang at midnight. Bobby asked his question. I gave the response. But around 1 a.m., while doing my hourly walkthrough, I encountered Rule 2. Room 12 sat at the end of the first-floor hallway, and its window faced the parking lot. During the day, guests could look out and see their cars, the highway beyond, and the mountains in the distance. At night, something looked back. As I walked past room 12, I caught movement in my peripheral vision. A pale face pressed against the glass from inside the room, white as bone with black circles around the eyes. A clown face, but wrong somehow, too thin, too angular, with a smile that stretched beyond where a human mouth should end. I remembered the rule. Never turn your back on the clown in room 12's window. Face it when you walk past. I stopped and turned toward the window. The face stared back at me, motionless except for its eyes, which trapped my movement with predatory focus. Its smile never wavered, painted red lips pulled back to reveal teeth that looked too sharp for any clown costume. I backed away slowly, keeping my eyes on the window. The face followed my movement, pressing closer to the glass. When I reached the end of the hallway, I turned the corner and ran back to the lobby, my heart hammering against my ribs. The next morning, I checked the guest registry. Room 12 was listed as vacant. It had been empty for 2 weeks. That room's been a problem since we opened, Maggie explained when I told her about the encounter. We stopped renting it out after the third guest complained about the clown in their window. But there's no clown costume in that room. No, she agreed. There isn't. She led me to room 12 and unlocked the door. Inside looked like any other motel room. 2 beds, a dresser, a small table, and chairs. The window faced the parking lot, just as I'd seen from outside. But something felt wrong about the space, as if the air itself was holding its breath. Guests used to complain about feeling watched, Maggie said, walking to the window. Said they'd see a face in the glass, but only when they weren't looking directly at it. Management brought in a priest to bless the room, sage burners, even had a medium come through. Nothing worked. She traced her finger along the window frame. Then we realized the face wasn't coming from inside the room. It was trapped in the glass itself, like an old photograph burned into the surface. Turn your back on it, and it gets agitated. Guests reported the feeling of something pressing against the window from inside, trying to get out. I studied the window glass, looking for any sign of an image or reflection. In the daylight, it appeared completely normal. Has anyone tried breaking the glass? Dennis did his last week here. Took a hammer to it one night after a particularly bad shift. Maggie's voice dropped. Glass shattered, but the face was still there in the fragments. Had to replace the whole window, and the face just appeared in the new glass the next night. We left room 12 and walked back to the lobby. The morning sun streamed through the windows, making the clown collection look almost cheerful. Almost. Tyler, Maggie said as we reached the front desk, I need to tell you something else about the rules. They're not suggestions or guidelines. They're a contract. This place, the cemetery across the street, the whole area, it's all connected. The rules keep things balanced. Balanced how? The dead stay dead, and the living stay alive. You break the rules, that balance shifts. And once it shifts, it's almost impossible to fix. She headed toward the door, then paused. Oh, and Tyler? Tonight you might encounter Rule 3. We've got a family checking into Room 6, the Washingtons from Phoenix. If they complain about children laughing, don't ask questions, just move them immediately. After she left, I stood in the lobby surrounded by hundreds of painted smiles, wondering what I'd gotten myself into. Outside, the cemetery stretched across the street like a reminder that some places hold on to their dead longer than others. That evening, as I prepared for my third night shift, I realized I was no longer just a motel manager. I was a keeper of rules designed to hold back the dark. The Washington family arrived at 7:30 p.m. in a dusty Ford Explorer loaded with camping gear and tired children. David Washington looked like every middle-aged father I'd ever seen. Polo shirt, khaki shorts, and the weary expression of someone who'd spent 6 hours listening to Are We There Yet? From the back seat, his wife, Linda, herded their 2 kids through the lobby while he handled check-in. The children, maybe 8 and 10 years old, stared wide-eyed at the clown collection, pointing and whispering to each other. 2 beds, non-smoking, David said, sliding his credit card across the desk. We're just passing through, heading to Death Valley tomorrow. Room 6 is ready for you, I said, processing his payment. The computer assigned them the room automatically, and I remembered Maggie's warning about this family. Great location on the first floor, easy access to your vehicle. As I handed him the key cards, Linda approached the desk with her daughter in tow. "Excuse me," she said, "but is there somewhere else my kids can wait? These dolls are giving Emma nightmares just looking at them." I glanced down at Emma, a pale girl with dark braids who clutched a stuffed rabbit. She stared at a vintage marionette hanging near the window, its strings tangled and its painted face chipped with age. "The dolls are just decorations," I assured her. "They can't hurt you." Emma looked up at me with serious brown eyes. "That one's not sleeping," she said, pointing at the marionette. "It keeps turning its head." Her father laughed and ruffled her hair. "Emma's got quite the imagination. She thinks every toy is alive." I looked at the marionette again. It hung motionless, facing toward the street exactly as it had been positioned earlier. But something about Emma's certainty made my skin crawl. "Room 6 is just down the hall," I said, handing David a small map of the motel layout. "Ice machine is at the end of the corridor, and there's a vending machine on the second floor if you need snacks." The family gathered their luggage and headed toward their room. I watched them disappear around the corner, then pulled out the rule sheet and reread number 3. If a guest complains about children laughing in their room, offer them a different room immediately. Do not investigate the laughter. At 9:15, while I was updating the guest registry, the desk phone rang. Not the rotary phone, the regular landline. "Front desk, this is Tyler." "Hi, this is David Washington in room 6. His voice carried a note of confusion. "We're having a noise issue. There are children laughing in our room, but we can't figure out where it's coming from." My stomach dropped. "Children laughing?" "Yeah, it sounds like kids playing hide and seek or something. My wife checked the bathroom. I looked under the beds, but there's no one here. The sound seems to be coming from inside the walls." I gripped the phone receiver. "Mr. Washington, I'm going to move you to a different room right away. No charge for the inconvenience." "Is there some kind of ventilation issue? Air ducts connecting to another room?" "Something like that," I lied. "Let me get room 9 ready for you. Much quieter location." Within 10 minutes, I had them relocated. As I helped carry their bags to the new room, Linda pulled me aside. "Has this happened before?" she asked. "The laughing?" "Occasionally we get noise complaints," I said, which was technically true. "Room 9 should be much better." After they settled in, I stood outside room 6 with my master key. The rule said not to investigate the laughter, but it didn't explicitly forbid checking the room after guests left. I unlocked the door and stepped inside. The room looked ordinary. 2 unmade beds, towels scattered on the bathroom floor, the lingering scent of David's cologne. I listened carefully, but heard only the hum of the air conditioning unit and traffic from Highway 95. Then faintly, I caught it. Children's laughter, sweet and innocent, echoing from somewhere I couldn't pinpoint. It sounded like a group of kids playing tag, their voices bright with joy. But underneath the laughter was something else. A hollow quality, like an echo of an echo. I backed toward the door, but the laughter grew louder, more distinct. I could make out individual voices now. A boy giggling as if someone was tickling him, a girl shrieking with delight, and underneath it all, a sing-song chant I couldn't quite understand. The temperature in the room dropped suddenly. My breath formed small clouds in the air, and frost began spreading across the bathroom mirror. The laughter intensified, surrounding me from all directions, and I realized the children weren't just playing. They were hunting. I fled the room, slamming the door behind me and leaning against it as if my weight could keep whatever was inside from following. The laughter cut off abruptly, leaving only silence and the sound of my own ragged breathing. Back at the lobby, I tried to focus on normal tasks. Check guest registrations, count the till, update the logbook. But my hands shook as I wrote, and I kept glancing toward the hallway that led to room 6. At 11:45, a trucker named Jake Morales came in wanting a room for the night. He was hauling produce from California to Denver, a big man with calloused hands and tired eyes who just wanted a shower and 6 hours of sleep. "Any room's fine," he said, pulling crumpled bills from his wallet. "I've slept in truck cabs for 3 days straight." I gave him room 8, 2 doors down from the Washington's new location. As he headed toward his room, I noticed he paused outside room 6, tilting his head as if listening to something. "You hear that?" he called back to me. "Hear what?" "Sounds like kids playing. Kinda late for children to be up, isn't it?" The laughter had returned. Even with the room empty, whatever lived in room 6 continued its endless game. "Must be from the motel next door," I said, though the nearest building was the cemetery across the street. Jake shrugged and continued to his room. I made a note in the logbook to keep room 6 permanently vacant. At midnight, Bobby's call came as expected. Same question, same answer, same static-filled silence afterward. But tonight, something felt different about the conversation. The pause before he hung up lasted longer, and I thought I heard other voices in the background, children whispering, plotting something just beyond my hearing. Around 1:30 a.m., while doing my rounds, I encountered my first real test of Rule 2. As I approached room 12, the face appeared in the window earlier than usual. This time, it pressed against the glass with such force that the surface bulged outward, as if something was trying to push through from inside. I stopped and faced the window directly. The clown's painted smile stretched wider than before, revealing rows of yellowed teeth that belonged in no human mouth. Its black circled eyes rolled in their sockets, tracking my movement with predatory hunger. But tonight, I noticed something new. Frost covered the inside of the window where the face touched the glass, creating crystalline patterns that looked almost like fingerprints. The thing was getting stronger, more present, as if the barrier between its world and ours was wearing thin. I backed away slowly, maintaining eye contact until I reached the safety of the lobby. Behind me, I heard a sound like nails scraping against glass. At 2:45 a.m., remembering Rule 4, I walked to the second floor to check the ice machine. Sure enough, a puddle of red liquid had formed beneath the dispenser. The substance looked like blood, but smelled metallic and sweet, like copper pennies mixed with cherry syrup. I hung the out-of-order sign and made a note to clean up the mess after 3 a.m., when the machine returned to normal operation. As I turned to leave, I heard footsteps in the hallway behind me. A small figure stood at the far end of the corridor, backlit by the exit sign. At first glance, it looked like a child in pajamas, exactly what Rule 5 warned about. But as my eyes adjusted, I realized this wasn't the boy I was supposed to call Maggie about. This was Emma Washington, the little girl who'd noticed the marionette moving. "Emma?" I called softly. "What are you doing up here?" She turned toward me, and in the dim light I saw her face was streaked with tears. "They won't stop laughing," she said. "They want me to play with them." "Who wants you to play?" "The children in the walls. They say they've been waiting so long for someone who can hear them properly." She wiped her nose with the back of her hand. "They're lonely." I approached her carefully, remembering that Rule 5 specifically mentioned a boy in pajamas, not a living guest. "Emma, let's get you back to your parents." "They can't hear them," she said. "Adults usually can't, unless they're dying or getting ready to join them." She looked at me with those serious brown eyes. "But you can hear them a little bit, can't you?" She was right. Standing in the hallway, I could detect the faint echo of children's laughter seeping through the walls, accompanied by whispered invitations and promises of eternal games. "Come on," I said, taking her hand. "Let's get you back to room 9. As we walked down the stairs, Emma looked back over her shoulder. "They're following us," she whispered. "They really, really want to play." I didn't look back, but I could feel something watching from the shadows. Something that had learned patience from decades of waiting. I knocked softly on room 9's door, Emma's small hand still gripping mine. David answered in rumpled pajamas, his hair sticking up at odd angles. "Emma, we've been looking everywhere for you." He pulled his daughter into a hug, then looked at me with concern. "Where did you find her?" "Second floor, near the ice machine," I said. "She was sleepwalking, I think." Linda appeared behind her husband, wrapping a robe around herself. "Emma doesn't sleepwalk. She never has." Emma looked up at her parents with those serious eyes. "I wasn't sleeping. The children called me. They wanted to show me their games." David and Linda exchanged glances. The kind of wordless conversation parents have when a child says something that makes no sense, but feels too specific to dismiss. "What children, sweetheart?" Linda asked, kneeling to Emma's level. "The ones who live in the walls. They used to stay in our old room, but now they're everywhere. They're excited because someone finally came who can play properly." A chill settled over the hallway. David cleared his throat. "Emma, there are no children here except you and your brother. It's just your imagination." "They told me their names," Emma continued, her voice matter of fact. "There's Sarah, who fell down the mine shaft, and Tommy, who got sick from the bad water, and Michael, who—" "That's enough," Linda said firmly. "Back to bed. No more wandering around at night." After they closed the door, I stood in the hallway listening to muffled conversations from inside the room. Emma's voice carried through the thin walls, insistent and clear, describing children who sounded very real to her. I returned to the lobby and pulled out my phone to call Maggie, then remembered the lack of cell service. Instead, I used the desk phone to dial her home number. "Tyler?" "It's past 3 in the morning. What's wrong?" "I had an encounter with one of the guest children. She can hear them. The children in the walls. She was wandering around the second floor, said they were calling to her." Silence stretched across the line. Finally, Maggie spoke. "Describe her." "About 8 years old. Dark braids, serious expression. She noticed the marionette moving when her family first checked in." "Jesus." Maggie's voice carried real fear now. "Tyler, listen carefully. That little girl is in danger. When a living child can communicate with the dead ones, they don't just want to play, they want a permanent playmate." "What do I do?" "Keep her away from room 6 and watch for signs that she's being influenced. If she starts talking about staying at the motel forever, or mentions wanting to join the games, call me immediately. After hanging up, I tried to focus on routine tasks, but Emma's words echoed in my mind. The children had names, histories, detailed stories about how they died. That suggested they weren't just random spirits. They were specific souls with specific connections to Tonopah. At 4:30 a.m., while updating the maintenance log, I heard the vending machine on the second floor cycling through its operations. The mechanical sounds were wrong somehow, too slow, like the machinery was struggling against something thick and viscous. I climbed the stairs to investigate, remembering Rule 6 about the vending machine taking money, but dispensing nothing. The hallway felt colder than usual, and my breath formed small puffs in the air. The vending machine's display flickered between different selections, cycling through candy bars and sodas without any pattern. As I approached, it suddenly dispensed a Snickers bar, then a Coke, then a bag of chips, all without anyone inserting money or making selections. Products clattered into the bottom tray in rapid succession, filling it to overflowing. Candy bars and drink cans spilled onto the floor, rolling across the carpet in all directions. The machine's internal lights flashed erratically, and the coin mechanism made grinding sounds like it was chewing metal. Then, as abruptly as it started, everything stopped. The machine went dark, its display reading "out of order" in red letters. The scattered products remained on the floor, but when I bent to collect them, my hands passed through empty air. The items were there, but not there. Visible but intangible, like projections or memories. I backed away from the machine and its phantom products, making a mental note to warn any guests about malfunctions. As I reached the stairwell, I heard the mechanical cycling begin again, accompanied by the sound of products dispensing into an endless void. Back in the lobby, I found someone waiting for me. A small boy stood near the registration desk, maybe 7 years old, wearing faded blue pajamas with cartoon rockets printed on them. His feet were bare, and his hair looked like it hadn't been combed in decades. When he turned toward me, I saw eyes that belonged to someone much older than his apparent age. Rule 5. If you see a small boy in pajamas in the lobby, do not speak to him. Call Maggie immediately. I reached for the phone, keeping my eyes on the child. He watched me with curious interest, tilting his head like a bird studying an insect. His skin had a pale, waxy quality that reminded me of the clown faces painted on the lobby walls. "Tyler?" Maggie answered on the first ring, as if she'd been waiting by her phone. "He's here, the boy in pajamas. Don't engage with him. Don't answer any questions he asks. I'm on my way." The boy stepped closer to the desk, his bare feet making no sound on the carpet. Up close, I could see that his pajamas were torn in several places, and dark stains covered the fabric around his chest and stomach. "Are you the new keeper?" he asked, his voice carrying an accent I couldn't place. Something old-fashioned, from another era. I gripped the phone receiver but didn't respond. "The last keeper tried to help us," the boy continued, walking around the desk with that strange, bird-like curiosity. "He broke the rules because he felt sorry for us. But help isn't what we need anymore." He stopped directly in front of me, close enough that I should have felt his breath or body heat. Instead, the air around him felt like stepping into a walking freezer. "We need playmates who can stay forever. The girl with the braids understands. She's already learning our games." My hands shook as I maintained my grip on the phone. The boy studied my face with those ancient eyes, seeming to find something amusing in my terror. "You can hear us sometimes, can't you? When you're very quiet, when you're very afraid. We've been practicing, getting stronger. Soon we won't need the rooms or the machines or the phones. We'll be able to play anywhere." He reached toward my face with one pale hand, and I jerked backward, nearly falling off my chair. The boy smiled. Not a child's smile, but something predatory and patient. The rules keep us contained, but they also keep us fed. Every person who stays here, every person who hears us, gives us a little more strength. Soon we'll have enough to leave this place and find new playgrounds. Headlights swept across the lobby windows as Maggie's truck pulled into the parking lot. The boy looked toward the door, then back at me. "Tell the keeper we remember her promises," he said. "Tell her we're tired of waiting." He walked toward the hallway that led to the guest rooms, his torn pajamas trailing behind him like burial shrouds. As he reached the corner, he glanced back over his shoulder. "Take good care of the girl with braids," he said. "We have such wonderful games planned for her." Then he was gone, vanished as if he'd never been there at all. Maggie burst through the front door 30 seconds later, her face pale and her breathing labored from running. "Where is he?" Gone. Disappeared down the hallway toward the rooms. I set the phone receiver down with trembling hands. "Maggie, he talked about Emma, the Washington girl. He said they have games planned for her." Maggie closed her eyes and leaned against the registration desk. "This is bad, Tyler, very bad. When the boy starts talking about specific guests, it means they're moving beyond the rules. They're evolving." "What kind of promises did you make to them?" She looked at me with exhausted eyes. "The kind you make when you're desperate to keep something terrible from getting worse." Maggie locked the front door and flipped the sign to "Manager on duty." She walked to the coffee machine behind the registration desk and started a fresh pot, her movements sharp and focused. 23 years ago, she said without looking at me, this place was just another roadside motel. Clean rooms, fair prices, nothing special. Then the owner decided to capitalize on our proximity to the cemetery by adding the clown theme. Thought it would bring in more tourists. She poured coffee into 2 mugs, her hands steady despite everything that had just happened. What he didn't know was that clowns have always been connected to the boundary between life and death. Court jesters, funeral mourners, carnival performers. They exist in the spaces between normal and strange. I accepted the coffee gratefully, needing the warmth. What happened? The first death was a mining accident in 1987. Joe Ferretti and his boy, Bobby, were exploring some of the old tunnels outside town when a support beam gave way. Joe died instantly, but Bobby lived for 3 days in the hospital before succumbing to his injuries. Maggie sat down across from me, cradling her mug. They buried them side by side in the cemetery across the street. About a week later, the motel guests started reporting strange phone calls. Always the same child's voice, always asking about his father. That's when the rules started? The original owner, Frank Delacroix, tried everything else first. Brought in priests, paranormal investigators, even considered demolishing the building. Nothing worked. The phone calls continued, and other phenomena started manifesting. Guests reported children laughing in empty rooms, faces in windows, vending machines dispensing impossible things. She stood and walked to the window overlooking the cemetery. Dawn was breaking over the mountains, painting the headstones in pale gold light. Frank couldn't afford to lose business, so he developed the rules as a way to manage the supernatural activity. Follow the protocols, and the guests stay safe. The entities get their acknowledgement, their tiny bit of interaction with the living world, but within controlled parameters. You said you made promises to them. Maggie's reflection in the window looked older than her actual years. When Frank retired and sold me the motel, the activity was escalating. The dead children were getting more aggressive, more demanding. They'd learned that fear and attention made them stronger. She turned back to me, her expression grim. So I made a deal. They could have their phone calls, their manifestations, their games, but only within the boundaries set by the rules. In exchange, they had to leave the living guests alone. But now they're breaking that agreement. Emma Washington changed everything. Most adults can't hear them clearly, and the few children who pass through usually can't distinguish their voices from imagination. But Emma is different. She's a natural medium, completely open to spiritual communication. The implications hit me like cold water. They want her. They need her, Maggie corrected. A living child who can see them, hear them, interact with them fully. She could be their anchor to the physical world. With Emma's abilities, they wouldn't be confined to this motel anymore. A soft knock on the front door interrupted our conversation. Through the glass, I could see David Washington in yesterday's clothes, looking haggard and worried. Maggie unlocked the door and let him in. "Mr. Washington, is everything all right?" "No, it's not." He ran his hands through his hair, leaving it even more disheveled. "Emma won't sleep. She keeps talking about children who want to play with her forever. And my wife, Linda's starting to hear things too." My stomach dropped. What kind of things? Whispers in the bathroom, giggling from inside the walls. She found Emma this morning sitting on the floor, having a full conversation with empty air. When Linda asked who she was talking to, Emma said she was learning the rules of a new game. Maggie and I exchanged glances. This was exactly what she'd warned about. The dead children's influence spreading to Emma's family. "Mr. Washington," Maggie said carefully, "I think it would be best if you checked out early. There's no charge for the inconvenience." "That's the problem. We can't leave." David's voice carried a note of panic. "Our car won't start. The engine turns over, but it dies immediately. The mechanic at Jim Butler Motors says there's nothing wrong with it mechanically." "Have you tried calling a tow truck?" 3 different companies. None of them can make it out here today. Equipment failures, scheduling conflicts, sudden emergencies. David looked between us with growing suspicion. It's like something doesn't want us to leave. The truth was becoming clear. The dead children weren't just interested in Emma. They were actively preventing her departure. "Mr. Washington," I said, "keep Emma and your family in your room today. Don't let her wander the hallways alone, and don't let her go near room 6 under any circumstances." "Why? What's in room 6? Maggie stepped forward. "There's been some pest control issues in that section. Unsafe for children until we get it resolved." After David left, Maggie pulled out her cell phone and tried calling the local mechanic. No answer. She tried the tow companies David had mentioned. Same result. Straight to voicemail or busy signals. "They're isolating the family," she said, setting her phone down with frustration. "Making sure Emma can't leave until they've completed whatever ritual they have planned." "What kind of ritual?" "I don't know the specifics, but in folklore, spirits who want to cross between worlds need a willing human anchor. Someone who invites them in, accepts their presence, agrees to their terms." Maggie's voice dropped to a whisper. "Emma's young enough to be convinced that these children just want to be her friends." At 10 a.m., I tried to catch a few hours of sleep in room 15, but every time I closed my eyes, I heard children's laughter echoing through the walls. Not the innocent sounds of kids at play, but something calculated and patient, like predators discussing strategy. I gave up on sleep around 2 p.m. and decided to investigate the basement. Rule 7 prohibited going down there alone after 10 p.m., but it was mid-afternoon, and I needed to understand what we were dealing with. The basement door was located behind the registration desk, painted the same beige as the walls to make it nearly invisible. I'd noticed it on my first day, but had never thought to explore. Now, with everything happening upstairs, I needed to know what the motel was hiding in its foundations. The door opened onto a narrow staircase leading down into darkness. I found a light switch and flicked it on, revealing a typical basement. Concrete walls, exposed pipes, and the building's heating and cooling equipment. Nothing unusual at first glance. But as I descended the stairs, the temperature dropped noticeably. By the time I reached the bottom, my breath was forming visible clouds, and frost covered the basement walls like crystalline spider webs. The basement extended further than I'd expected, stretching beneath the entire motel structure. Support pillars divided the space into sections, and in the far corner, I spotted something that made my blood freeze. A dozen small beds were arranged in a circle, each one perfectly made with faded children's bedding. Teddy bears and dolls sat propped against pillows, their button eyes reflecting the overhead lights. The beds looked like they'd been prepared for occupants who might arrive at any moment. I approached the circle carefully, noting that each bed had a name embroidered on the pillow: Sarah, Tommy, Michael, Rebecca, James, and others. The names Emma had mentioned upstairs. In the center of the circle sat a larger bed with white sheets and a pillow embroidered with Emma in delicate script. They'd been preparing for her arrival. A sound from upstairs made me look toward the ceiling. Children's footsteps running across the lobby floor, accompanied by excited whispers and giggles. But I knew the lobby was empty, except for Maggie. I pulled out my phone to take pictures of the beds, but the camera function wouldn't work. The screen displayed only static when I tried to activate it. The basement itself seemed to resist documentation, as if it existed in a space between reality and nightmare. As I turned to leave, I noticed something else. Fresh flowers on one of the bedside tables, arranged in a small vase next to a glass of water that hadn't been there moments before. The flowers looked like the plastic ones from the cemetery, but these were real, with petals still dewy from recent picking. Someone, or something, was maintaining this space. I climbed the stairs quickly, my heart racing as the children's laughter grew louder overhead. When I emerged into the lobby, I found Maggie talking quietly on the phone while watching the hallway that led to the guest rooms. "Everything's accelerating," she said after hanging up. I just spoke to Linda Washington. Emma's been drawing pictures all afternoon, detailed sketches of children in old-fashioned clothes, all holding hands in a circle around a girl with dark braids. "There's a bed prepared for Emma in the basement," I told her, "along with beds for all the dead children. They've been planning this for a long time." Maggie closed her eyes and leaned against the desk. I was afraid of that. The basement has always been off-limits because it's where they're strongest. Down there, the boundary between life and death is thinnest. "We need to get the Washington family out of here." "How?" "Their car won't start, no tow trucks can reach us, and if we try to force them to leave on foot, Emma will resist. She's already too attached to her new friends." As if summoned by our conversation, Emma appeared at the end of the hallway. She walked toward us with the measured pace of a sleepwalker, but her eyes were wide open and focused. In her hands, she carried a sheet of paper covered in crayon drawings. "I finished the picture," she announced, approaching the registration desk. "They helped me remember all the details." She placed the drawing on the desk between us. It showed a basement filled with small beds arranged in a circle, with children sitting on each one. In the center, a girl with dark braids lay on a white bed, smiling peacefully while holding hands with the other children. At the bottom of the page, in a child's careful handwriting, were the words, "Emma's forever sleepover." "They are so excited," Emma said, her voice carrying in dreamy quality. "They've been waiting so long for a real friend. Tonight we're going to play the best game ever." She looked up at us with those serious brown eyes, but now they held something else. A glassy, distant quality that suggested she was no longer entirely present in her own body. The dead children weren't just calling to her anymore. They were already taking her home. Emma stood at the registration desk, still holding her crayon drawing, but something fundamental had changed in her posture. She held herself differently now, straighter, older, like someone wearing a costume that didn't quite fit. "The games start at midnight," she said, her voice carrying that same dreamy quality. "Everyone's invited to the basement party. Tommy says there will be cake." Maggie stepped forward carefully. "Emma, honey, do you remember your parents? Your mom and dad in room 9? "Of course." Emma tilted her head at an angle that seemed too sharp for a living child. "They can watch from upstairs, but they can't join the games. Only children can play properly." "What about your brother?" I asked. "Where is he?" "Marcus is sleeping. He's not ready yet. But Tommy thinks he might be ready tomorrow night." Emma's smile widened beyond what should have been possible for her small face. "We have time to teach him the rules." The phone at the front desk rang, not the rotary phone, but the regular landline. The caller ID showed room 9. The Washingtons. "Please." Linda Washington's voice cracked through the speaker when I answered. "Something's wrong with Emma. She's been gone for 20 minutes, and Marcus is talking in his sleep about children coming to get him. Mrs. Washington, Emma is here in the lobby with us. She's fine." "No." Linda's voice rose to near hysteria. "Emma is right here next to me. She's been sitting on her bed drawing pictures this whole time. She never left the room." I looked at Emma, who was still standing by the desk, still smiling that too wide smile. Maggie grabbed my arm, her fingernails digging into my skin. "Emma," she whispered, "where are your parents right now?" "In room 9, where they belong," Emma replied cheerfully. "Just like I'm in room 9, where I belong. But I'm also here, where I want to be. Tommy taught me how to be in 2 places at once. It's easy once you learn the trick." The realization hit me like ice water. This wasn't Emma Washington standing in our lobby. This was something else wearing her appearance, her memories, her voice. The real Emma was still in room 9, but whatever had been influencing her had created a projection, a spiritual duplicate that could interact with the physical world. "Maggie," I said quietly, "call the Washingtons back. Tell them to pack immediately and walk to the highway. Flag down a passing car, hitchhike, anything. They need to leave right now." But when I reached for the phone, the Emma thing stepped sideways with fluid grace and placed her small hand over mine. Her skin felt like touching frozen metal. "They can't leave," she said, her voice now carrying harmonics that belonged to multiple children speaking in unison. "We made promises, contracts. The living girl invited us in when she answered our call last night." "What call?" "When she heard us laughing and came to investigate. When she listened to our stories and felt sorry for us. When she said she wanted to be our friend forever." The Emma thing's eyes reflected light like glass marbles. "Forever is a very specific word, Tyler. It has power." Maggie pulled out her master keys and headed toward room 9. "I'm getting them out of here." But as she reached the hallway, every door in the motel slammed shut simultaneously. The sound echoed through the building like thunder, followed by the metallic click of locks engaging. Even the front door's deadbolt turned by itself, sealing us inside. "The rules are changing," the Emma thing announced with satisfaction. "We're strong enough now to write our own." I tried the front door, pulling and pushing against the handle. The lock mechanism had fused solid, as if the metal had melted and reformed. Through the glass, I could see Highway 95 stretching into the distance, tantalizingly close but completely inaccessible. The rotary phone began ringing. "It's not midnight," I said, checking my watch. "Bobby doesn't call until midnight." "Bobby's not calling anymore," the Emma thing replied. "He moved on last night, just like his daddy. We told him the burial was finished, and he went to his rest. But that left his phone line available for other voices." I stared at the rotary phone as it continued ringing. Rule 1 said I had to answer, but if Bobby was gone, who was calling? "Answer it," the Emma thing commanded. And for the first time, her childish facade slipped to reveal something ancient and hungry underneath. "The rules still apply, Keeper. Answer the phone." My hand trembled as I lifted the receiver. Instead of Bobby's young voice, I heard a chorus of children speaking in perfect unison. "Is our new friend ready to play?" The Emma thing nodded at me expectantly. I realized this was a test. They wanted me to follow the old response pattern, to validate their new reality. I don't know," I said. Silence stretched across the line. Then, in a voice that carried the fury of decades of imprisonment, the chorus responded, "Wrong answer." Every window in the motel exploded simultaneously. Glass shards erupted inward like crystalline shrapnel, carried by a wind that shouldn't have existed inside a closed building. The Emma thing laughed with delight as the storm of glass swirled around her without causing harm. Maggie and I ducked behind the registration desk as fragments embedded themselves in the walls and furniture. When the chaos settled, the motel felt different. The air moved differently, carrying scents of earth and decay that belonged underground. The lighting had changed too. The fluorescent fixtures still functioned, but they cast shadows in directions that defied the position of their bulbs. "Welcome to our playground," the Emma thing said, spreading her arms wide. "No more rules, no more boundaries, no more keeping us contained to one building." Through the broken windows, I could see the cemetery across the street. The headstones were moving, not falling or shifting, but walking across the grounds like slow, stone soldiers. They left trails of disturbed earth behind them as they approached the motel. "They're coming to collect their children," the Emma thing explained helpfully. "All the graves that have been waiting for their residents to come home." Maggie grabbed my arm. "The basement. If we can destroy the beds down there, break their anchor to this place, we might be able to stop this. The basement door is locked with everything else." "There's another way. Maintenance access through the utility room behind the kitchen." She pointed toward the back of the building. "But Tyler, if we go down there, we'll be in their strongest territory. The rules won't protect us anymore." The Emma thing overheard our whispered conversation. "Oh, please do visit the basement. The others are so excited to meet you properly. Sarah has been practicing her tea party manners, and Tommy learned a new song about bones." From upstairs came the sound of running footsteps and children's laughter. But these weren't the voices we'd been hearing through the walls. These sounded more solid, more present, as if actual children were racing through the hallways. A new voice called down from the second floor. Marcus Washington, Emma's younger brother. But his words carried the same unnatural harmonics as his sister's projection. "The ice machine is working again," he shouted. "It's dispensing red stuff, and it tastes like pennies and birthday cake." The real horror wasn't that the supernatural children were influencing the Washington kids. It was that they were recruiting them, transforming them into anchors for other spirits to manifest through. "How many are there?" I asked the Emma thing. "Dozens," she replied proudly. "Tonopah has been collecting lost children for over a century. mining accidents, disease outbreaks, families who got lost in the desert. They all found their way to the cemetery eventually, and now they found their way to us. She skipped toward the hallway, her movement producing sounds like breaking glass. Come see the new friends when you're ready. We'll be practicing our welcoming ceremony. After she disappeared around the corner, Maggie and I looked at each other with shared understanding. The situation had moved beyond rule management or supernatural containment. The dead children weren't just seeking attention or companionship anymore. They were building an army. The Washingtons, I said. We have to get to them before it's too late. It might already be too late, Maggie replied, but she was already moving toward the utility room. But we have to try. As we made our way through the darkened hallway, the building around us continued transforming. The walls showed signs of age that hadn't been there hours before. Paint peeling, wallpaper curling, wood grain showing through decades of wear. It was as if the motel was reverting to some older version of itself, or perhaps showing what it had always been beneath its mundane exterior. Behind us, the rotary phone began ringing again. This time, we didn't answer. The utility room door hung open like a mouth, revealing a narrow staircase that descended into absolute darkness. Maggie found a flashlight in the maintenance supplies, its beam weak, but better than stumbling blind into whatever waited below. Stay close, she whispered. Once we're down there, don't trust anything you see or hear. The basement exists in their world now, not ours. We descended slowly, each step creaking under our weight. The temperature dropped with every foot of depth, until our breath formed thick clouds that the flashlight beam couldn't penetrate. By the time we reached the bottom, frost covered every surface like winter had taken permanent residence underground. The basement had changed since my afternoon visit. The circle of children's beds remained, but now each one was occupied. Small figures lay beneath the covers, perfectly still, their faces pale as moonlight. Some wore old-fashioned nightgowns, others modern pajamas, but all shared the same peaceful expression of eternal sleep. Their eyes were open, staring at the ceiling with glassy satisfaction. In the center of the circle, Emma Washington lay on the white bed I'd seen prepared for her. But this wasn't the projection upstairs. This was the real Emma, her dark braids spread across the pillow, her stuffed rabbit clutched against her chest. Her breathing was so shallow, it barely disturbed the bedsheets. "They're draining her," Maggie said, her flashlight beam revealing the truth. "Using her life force to strengthen their manifestations upstairs." Around Emma's bed, translucent children moved in a slow dance, holding hands as they circled their newest friend. Their forms flickered between solid and ethereal, becoming more substantial with each rotation. As they gained density, Emma's breathing grew fainter. "We need to break the circle," I said, stepping toward the beds. But as my foot crossed the threshold of their formation, every child in the circle turned to look at us simultaneously. Their mouths opened in unison, releasing a sound like wind through broken glass. "Visitors," one of them exclaimed, her voice bright with artificial joy. "Are you here for the sleepover?" The child who spoke appeared to be about 10 years old, wearing a white nightgown stained with what looked like rust or dried blood. Her feet dangled from the bed, swinging back and forth with childish energy. "We're here for Emma," Maggie said firmly. "She doesn't belong with you." "Oh, but she does," another child replied, a boy with dark hair wearing coveralls that looked like they belonged to a 1940s farmer. "She invited us in. She said she wanted to be our friend forever. Forever means forever." The dancing children stopped their circle and faced us directly. Up close, I could see the signs of their various deaths. The girl in the nightgown had a dark bruise around her throat. The farm boy's coveralls were torn and muddy, as if from a cave-in, and a third child bore the pale complexion of someone who had died from illness. Sarah fell down the old mine shaft in 1923, the farm boy explained helpfully. Rebecca caught the influenza in 1918. I'm Tommy. Got buried alive when the tunnel collapsed in 1941. We've all been waiting so long for someone who could see us properly. Emma's just a child, I said. She doesn't understand what she agreed to. Children understand more than adults think, Sarah replied, her damaged throat giving her voice a raspy quality. Adults forget how to play, how to make real friends. But Emma remembers. She knows how to keep promises. Maggie stepped closer to Emma's bed. Let her go. Take me instead. The dead children tilted their heads in unison, like birds considering an interesting proposition. You're too old, Rebecca said with the blunt honesty of a sick child. Your life force is thick and bitter. Emma's is sweet and bright, like birthday cake or Christmas morning. Besides, Tommy added, you already made promises to us. Remember? 23 years ago when you agreed to let us have our manifestations in exchange for leaving guests alone. You can't make new deals until the old ones are fulfilled. From somewhere above us came the sound of footsteps and muffled conversations. The Washington parents were still alive, still trapped in room 9, probably watching their daughter's projection, while the real Emma faded away in the basement. What do you want? I asked. Really want? There has to be something more than just taking one child. The dead children exchanged glances, communicating in that wordless way children do when sharing secrets. We want to leave this place, Sarah said finally. We want to see the world beyond Tonopah, to play in new playgrounds, to make friends in other places. But we need an anchor, Tommy continued. Someone alive to tie us to the physical world. Emma's abilities make her perfect. She can see us clearly, hear us completely, and most importantly, she believes in us absolutely. Rebecca leaned forward with eager enthusiasm. Once she joins us permanently, we can travel anywhere through her consciousness. Imagine dead children appearing in playgrounds across the country, in schools, in homes where families have lost their own children. We could comfort so many lonely people. The horror of their plan became clear. They weren't just seeking escape. They were planning to spread their particular brand of supernatural comfort across the nation, using Emma's psychic abilities as a broadcasting antenna for their influence. You'd be parasites, Maggie said, feeding off grief and loss, offering false comfort to families who need to heal naturally. We'd be friends, Sarah corrected. Real friends who never leave, never grow up, never disappoint. Isn't that what every parent wants for their child? I looked at Emma lying motionless on the white bed. Her skin had taken on a waxy quality that reminded me of the clown dolls upstairs. Soon she'd be just another painted face, another permanent resident of this collection. There's another way, I said, surprising myself with the words. You want to leave this place? Fine. But you don't need Emma to do it. The dead children stopped their swaying movement, focusing on me with predatory interest. You need someone who can serve as an anchor, someone who believes in you and accepts your presence willingly. I stepped into the circle, feeling the temperature drop another 10 degrees. Someone who's already proven they can follow your rules and communicate with your world. Tyler, Maggie warned. Don't. I'll make the deal, I continued. My life force in exchange for Emma's freedom. But not here, trapped in this basement. I'll be your anchor in the outside world. Help you find new places to manifest, new families to comfort. The children conferred in whispers too quiet for living ears to distinguish. Finally, Tommy stepped forward as their apparent spokesperson. "You would do this willingly? Understanding that your life would become ours to share?" "Yes." "And you would help us find suitable families to visit?" I thought about the Washington family upstairs, about other children who might encounter these entities in different places. "I'll help you find what you're looking for." Sarah clapped her hands with delight. "Oh, this is much better than just keeping Emma. A willing adult anchor who understands our needs." They began forming a new circle around me, their translucent hands reaching toward my arms and shoulders. Where they touched, my skin numbed and my vision blurred. I could feel my life force beginning to transfer, flowing out of me and into their collective consciousness. But as the transfer began, I caught Maggie's eye and saw understanding flash across her face. She moved quickly, grabbing Emma from the white bed and lifting the unconscious girl into her arms. "Run," I told her. "Get them out of here." The dead children realized what was happening, a moment too late. Their connection to me was already established, their hunger focused on my life force instead of Emma's. They couldn't break the transfer without losing the energy they'd already absorbed. "This isn't what we agreed," Rebecca shrieked, her voice rising to a pitch that made my ears ring. "You wanted a willing anchor," I said, feeling my strength drain away but maintaining my resolve. "You didn't specify the terms of service." Maggie reached the stairs with Emma in her arms, the girl already showing signs of recovery as the supernatural drain was redirected to me. The dead children's furious protests echoed through the basement, but they were trapped by their own supernatural laws. A willing bargain, once accepted, couldn't be broken without mutual consent. As Maggie disappeared up the stairs, I felt myself becoming something else, something between living and dead. The dead children's consciousness merged with mine, and suddenly I could see through their eyes, understand their desperate loneliness, feel their century of isolation. They weren't evil, just lost, confused and hungry for connection. But they were also dangerous, and now they were my responsibility. The basement grew quiet as the transfer completed. I stood in the circle of empty beds, no longer entirely human, but not yet entirely dead. Upstairs, I could hear car engines starting. Somehow, the Washington family's vehicle was working again, the supernatural interference broken by my bargain. The dead children watched me with new respect and anticipation. "So," Tommy said with genuine curiosity, "where shall we go first?" "The Clown Motel operates normally now, or what passes for normal in a place where the dead and living maintain an uneasy partnership. Maggie handles the day shift, checking in tourists who pose for photos with the painted murals and buy postcards featuring the winking neon sign. She never mentions the basement, never talks about the rules that once governed this place. I work the night shift, same as before, but my duties have evolved. The phone still rings at midnight, but now it's different children calling. They report in from across the country, a lonely playground in Ohio where a grieving mother visits her daughter's swing set every evening, the hospital in Oregon where families gather around bedsides, a cemetery in Maine where fresh flowers appear on graves with no living relatives to place them. The dead children have learned subtlety under my guidance. Instead of demanding permanent playmates, they offer comfort to those who need it most. A whispered word of encouragement to a child afraid of the dark. A gentle presence for elderly people dying alone. Brief manifestations that bring peace instead of terror. It's not perfect. Sometimes their hunger gets the better of them, and I have to redirect their attention before they become too attached to a particular family. But they're learning, adopting, becoming something closer to guardian spirits than predatory entities. The Washington family made it home safely. Emma remembers fragments of her time here. She still draws pictures of children in old-fashioned clothes, but now they're playing games that look joyful rather than threatening. Her parents took her to therapists who diagnosed the experience as a stress reaction to travel and strange surroundings. Emma never corrected them. Last week, I received a postcard from Phoenix with no return address. The image showed the Grand Canyon at sunset, and on the back, in a child's careful handwriting, "Thank you for teaching them to be better friends. Marcus Washington doesn't remember any of it." Sometimes that's how childhood trauma works. The mind protects itself by forgetting. His parents are grateful for the amnesia. Room 6 stays permanently vacant now. The laughter has stopped, and the children who once lived in those walls have moved on to better purposes. Room 12's window reflects only normal images, though sometimes at dusk I catch glimpses of faces that wave rather than stare with hunger. The basement serves as a communications center now. The beds remain, but they're empty, except for when I need to make contact with the scattered spirits. Lying on Emma's former bed, I can project my consciousness across thousands of miles, checking on my charges and ensuring they remember their new purpose. Maggie knows what I've become, though we don't discuss it openly. She brings me coffee that I can't taste, and food that provides no nourishment. Gestures of humanity that help anchor whatever's left of Tyler Kowalski to this world. In return, I make sure the motel runs smoothly and the tourists stay safe. The dead children call me teacher now instead of keeper. They've learned that connection doesn't require consumption, that friendship can exist without possession. Some nights, when the highway is quiet and the desert wind carries voices from the cemetery, I almost think we've achieved something good here. But I'm not entirely human anymore. And good is a relative concept when you exist between worlds. The neon clown sign still winks every 30 seconds, casting pink and blue shadows across the parking lot. Travelers see it as a quirky roadside attraction, a place to stretch their legs and snap photos. They have no idea they're visiting a training ground for the supernatural, a place where the dead learn to serve the living instead of consuming them. Most nights, that feels like enough. Tonight, the phone rings at midnight, and I answer with practiced patience. "Teacher," Sarah's voice whispers through the static. "We found a little boy in Seattle who's afraid to sleep. Can we help him?" "Tell me about him," I say, and begin another lesson in compassionate haunting.